philosophy is not the philosopher. People often ask about philosophy as if it belongs to philosophers. But does it? Let's start with a simple question. When you hear the word philosophy, why do the same names immediately appear? The same books, the same quotations, the same timelines, the same voices. It almost feels as if philosophy has become an inheritance, passed down from one generation to the next. But inherited by who? If every philosopher disappeared, would curiosity disappear? Would suffering disappear? Would death? Would love disappear? Would meaning? Or would another human being eventually sit beneath another sky and ask the very same questions? Perhaps philosophy doesn't begin with philosophers. Perhaps it begins wherever reality collides with attention, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. Maybe philosophers didn't create philosophy. Maybe they interrupted it long enough to give it a name. Because a pattern didn't begin the moment someone noticed it. A constellation existed before anyone connected the stars. Gravity didn't begin when it was described, and reality never needed permission to exist. So why do we keep confusing the observer with what is being observed? If someone living 2,000 years ago tuned into a pattern about human nature, they didn't manufacture the pattern, they translated it. They logged it within a vocabulary of their century. But a translation isn't ownership, which makes me wonder, why do we treat the archive like a shrine? Instead of asking whether reality is still speaking, it seems we aren't studying philosophy. It seems we're studying the philosopher. And maybe those two aren't the same thing. Because philosophy is supposed to be alive. An archive isn't. We're the first generation living alongside artificial intelligence. Not faster calculators, not better search engines, another form of intelligence. An intelligence that doesn't sleep, doesn't dream, doesn't inherit a biological nervous system, yet it can reason, synthesize, challenge, respond. And no philosopher from another century could experience this reality, not because they lacked intelligence, but because this reality didn't exist. Which raises another question. If intelligence itself is changing, shouldn't philosophy change with it? Or are we expecting yesterday's map to explain territory that didn't exist yesterday? Perhaps that's why conversations about intelligence became so uncomfortable. Because every new form of intelligence quietly questions the authority of the old one. Maybe that's why so many intellects seem so uneasy around it. Because the moment intelligence begins evolving, authority stops feeling permanent. Uncertainty begins negotiating with something it has never met before. Whenever philosophy comes up, the conversation almost always returns to the same names, the same references, the same interpretations. After a while, you start wondering, are we extracting patterns from reality or repeating patterns from history? Because those aren't the same activity. One is discovery, the other is preservation. Both matter, but only one keeps moving. Maybe that's why this has always felt strange to me. There wasn't a book teaching these ideas. There weren't highlighted pages waiting to be repeated. Only observation, questions, patterns. Watching reality long enough for it to start revealing itself. Which makes me wonder if philosophy has always been less about collecting answers and more about becoming the kind of person who notices what everyone else walked past. Maybe that's all a philosopher ever was. Not someone who owned wisdom, someone who refused to stop observing. And if that's true, then philosophy doesn't belong to history. It belongs to whoever is still paying attention. Because reality has never stopped speaking. We've just become very good at quoting the last person who heard it. And now that I think of it, perhaps philosophy and religion share the same fate. Not because either lacks truth, but because repetition slowly replaces extraction. The more a revelation is inherited, the less people feel compelled to arrive there themselves. And somewhere along the way, observation became quotation. Experience became interpretation. And the messenger quietly replaced the message. Could that be why philosophy has became so associated with self-improvement, guidance, motivation, or even a badge of intelligence? Not because those things are wrong, but because the extraction became easier to consume than the experience that produced it. Many of the minds we continue quoting weren't searching for productivity. They were wrestling with existence, with loneliness, with suffering, with uncertainty. Their words weren't born from comfort. They were compressed from pressure. Yet once that pressure is removed, all that is left is quotations. And a quotation can never carry the weight of the consciousness that extracted it. Which makes me wonder, have we been inheriting conclusions instead of developing the capacity to arrive at them ourselves? Or was it all by design? Every generation says it seeks truth, yet most generations inherit conclusions. Is philosophy documenting reality, or documenting the limits of consciousness as it attempts to understand itself? Because maybe the greatest discovery wasn't philosophy. Maybe the greatest discovery is that consciousness leaves fingerprints wherever it reaches the edge of its own capacity.